I've had a number of people come to me recently and ask, what do I think about this AI push? It's a great question. There is a number of different perspectives you can take on this. I mean, there's always the AI bros out there that are telling you that if you're not already on the AI bandwagon, you're already behind. Then you also have the people that are the AI doomsdayers, the naysayers, the people that say this is doing destructive harm to us, that this is going to cause the end of humanity, and so on and so forth. And so the question becomes, what is the truth? Well, I don't know that I can give you truth, but I can certainly give you my informed opinion. This is going to be largely to my fellow colleagues in the software development industry. Computer programmers, testers, product owners, product managers, scrum masters, agile coaches, and the like. That being said, a lot of what I'm going to say here is very applicable to a lot of different industries. So let's dive in. So there's a number of questions that we could probably address with this. Let's start with the first one, which I think is a big concern for a lot of people. Will AI replace me? Excellent question. I'm glad you asked. I think there's two questions we need to be able to answer behind that in order to know, will it replace me? Number one, is AI capable of replacing me? Okay. And number two, regardless of the answer to that question, will companies try to replace me? Well, let's start with the latter question because that's easier. Will companies try to replace me? Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're going to. In fact, they already are. They're trying to. And not every company, but I think particularly the pathological companies, the companies that are pathocracies, these are the companies that are most likely to try to replace people in order to cut wages. So are they going to try? Oh, yeah. The question is whether or not it's going to actually succeed. So that gets us back to the first question. Is AI capable of replacing me? Is AI capable of doing what I do? The short answer is no. Now, will it get there? I don't know. I don't think so. My personal opinion is I don't think that the AI technologies that we have today have a pathway towards being able to replace you. But let's look at that a little bit closer. Will AI replace me? So first off, we need to understand AI, the way it's used. And I use AI as a registered trademark because it's not real AI. It's not what they're calling AGI. In fact, it's weird. 5 years ago, we all had a common understanding of what AI meant. It was the matrix. It was artificial intelligence that's capable of reasoning and rationality and understanding the world. Well, we pushed that now. We said, oh no, we've created AI, but it's not that. That we're now calling AGI. Well, we may get to some other milestone that we call AGI and say, oh, well, that's not it. We're going to push that up to another definition. So keep in mind, what we've created is not what we have historically thought of as true AI or true artificial intelligence, the ability to independently, rationally reason through. What we have in terms of artificial intelligence, registered trademark, is we have a set of tools that mimic human interaction. That's really what we have. And these human interactions are operating really no better than about a junior level. And even that's a little bit of a stretch. Now, you might say, Chad, I've seen it do some things that you would not believe. Okay, really? Really? The Dunning-Kruger effect is alive and well. In general, people that are truly experts in their field, and when I say experts, I'm talking about true mastery. Mastery comes at around 10,000 hours is the rough estimate. And that is a rough estimate. It's a mean, it's not an exact number, but mastery comes through around 10,000 hours of constant work in a field. Well, 10,000 hours, if you did 2,000 hours a year, that's 5 years. So you're saying, okay, I have 5 years. Well, even that's not a great estimate because the reality is in 5 years of work, you're doing a lot more things than just the one activity. You're having to deal with administration. You're having to deal with other duties as assigned. So more often than not, to get to true mastery of a skill or a skill set in any industry is usually going to take somewhere around 10 to 15 years for most people. So 10 to 15 years is when you achieve true mastery. And at that point, you are then qualified to be able to look at the results of someone or something to determine whether or not it's actually expert, junior, or junk. So if you don't have that, I'm not really going to listen to your opinion. If you just picked this up and said, look, I can code up an app in no time. Yeah, I don't believe you. Chances are you've created more work for yourself and you don't even realize it yet. So in general, AI is operating at best, a junior level. Now, a fast junior, I will give you that. What it's able to do in a short amount of time, the kind of messes it can make in a short amount of time is impressive. But that doesn't mean that it's really operating like a human would operate. So is it capable of operating at a junior level? Well, even then it's suspect, right? So we're having to deal with hallucinations where it makes information up. We're having to deal with the fact that it's going to create shortcuts and it can get myopic. It can start being obstinate about its own rightness. And a lot of times you have to confront it before the algorithm behind the scenes will let go of a certain particular train of thought. I use the word train of thought there, a term train of thought. It's not really a train of thought as we understand it. It's more of a line of logical reasoning as a part of its pattern finding, right? So will it replace us? That really comes down to the question. Another thing I want to explore with this is if we were to then say, okay, it's as good as juniors, then we can replace juniors. There's a lot of people that are picking up on the problem here. A junior person is going to grow from a junior to a mid-level to a senior. At least a lot of us will. AI does not seem to have that ability. Even after a few years with AI development, the improvements that have been made, while they're not totally unimpressive, they're not moving it out of the realm of junior. It's still very much a junior way of doing things. And a lot of that comes down to real expertise in something comes into wisdom. You have to really understand not only the knowledge behind, but also the applicable use behind it and how that works. So there's that. Let's also look at the fact that if it were going to be able to replace you, let's assume for a moment that it gets to that capability. If it's able to replace you at the junior level, mid-level, senior level, whatever that might be, what do you think is the replacement cost of a human being in our industry? 60,000, 90,000 a year, 120,000, 150,000, 200,000 a year? What's that number? That number grows obviously with time and experience. But if these tools were capable of replacing us, these AI companies would be charging on the order of replacing a human being. I don't see that happening. I certainly see some companies trying to do that. And I've heard about companies that are paying an arm and a leg for a bunch of AI bots. I haven't seen any of those become effective at all. So if they were able to do that, I think we would start seeing the cost of these AI tools rise to maybe not the order of a junior developer or a junior tester or a junior resource, but I would certainly expect to be at least be half of that. I would expect that if it were truly capable of replacing software developers or testers, or you pick the industry, researchers, accountants, if it were truly able to do that, AI, these companies, they absolutely want to make a profit. They're going to start charging you probably half of the salary that they're replacing. Why would you not? Why would you leave that money on the table? That makes no sense, because now you're competing for the same resources. You're competing for the same jobs. I don't see that. Maybe you see that. If you see that, let me know. But I have yet to see an AI company that's charging the level that you're going to achieve from offshore. And if you were able to do that that brings up another question. If you're able to do that, replace junior developers or mid-level developers with AI, and you could do that at half the cost, well, now you're competing with the offshore arena or the nearshore arena. And those rates are much cheaper too. And so now you're having to compete there as well. And again, maybe you're going to undercut them, but you're still going to get pretty close to those, because why leave money on the table? Companies don't like to leave money on the table. I don't know if you've noticed that about capitalism, but in general, companies are going to try to charge as much as the market will bear. Well, we're talking about wages, which is the number one cost for the majority of companies out there. Why would you not get close to replacement cost? That makes no sense. Economically, that makes no sense. So all that to say, coming back, is it capable of replacing me? No. And I think all the indicators seem to point to no right now. Could it get there at some point? Maybe. I don't see it with the technologies that we have today, with LLMs, with machine learning, the way those algorithms work. I don't see it. I think we would truly have to understand rationality and intelligence first in our own minds to be able to create an engine that's capable of replacing us from an intelligence perspective. So I don't see that happening. Maybe it does. I could be wrong. But yeah, to me, it's just not a big fear. Second question, will it make me faster? Okay, that's a good question. My first response is a question back. What do you mean by faster? That seems like a loaded question. By faster, do you mean it will generally make me run faster, but at a cost? Let me give you an analogy. If I have a bicycle and I strap to that bicycle on the back of it a couple of jet engines, am I going to go faster? Oh yeah, I'm going to go way faster. I'm also going to have the worst case of road rash you've ever seen, assuming I'm still alive at the end of it. So just because you go faster doesn't mean you're in a better place. So what do you mean by faster? One of the problems that we seem to be running into with AI is certainly it's capable of generating a lot of code in a very short amount of time. Create your own website, Base44, create your own app, Replit. So there's these tools out there that are basically telling you, you don't need to understand computer engineering or computer science. You don't need to understand testing or software development methodology. You don't need to understand teams. You just need our tool. Tools, to be clear, have never solved problems. People solve problems. Tools are amplifiers. They always have been, they always will be. And if you get those confused, you're going to find you get very lackluster results, very lackluster results. People solve problems. Always have, always will. Tools are simply amplifiers to people, and they will amplify the good and the bad. And the bad. So, is AI capable of generating a lot more code than you are capable of typing on your own? Yeah. Is it good code? No, not even close. Not even close. So the problem is that these AI tools have been trained on the code that's out there. Well, most of the code that exists in the world is not out there. It's not on the internet. It's not in the GitHubs or the Bitbuckets or wherever it may be. That's not where most of the code lives. Most of the code that runs the world is behind private repositories because it's proprietary. Companies don't want you to see their code. So it's not public. It's not public information. It's not public knowledge. So keep in mind, the only code that these AI tools have been trained on is the code to which they have access. Well, I look at most of that code and it's junk. Most of the code follows data-driven approaches and REST-style approaches, and these are not great approaches. They're not terrible. They kind of are terrible. So these are not great approaches. If you want a great approach, you need to read Martin Fowler and you need to read Robert C. Martin. These are the people that influence us in terms of writing really good software architecture. Robert C. Martin in particular, Uncle Bob, talks about his layered approach to architecture. And he talks about the entities, the use cases, the interfaces, and then the I/O outside of that. You can look at that as a layered diagram. You can look at that. He does it as concentric circles. There's a few different ways to think about the world. But ultimately, what he's telling you is you should design objects and layers and structures based on real world concepts. Your architecture should be a reflection of the problem space. It should not look like a web application. It should not look like MVC. It should not look like REST. It should not look like data driven. That's not the idea. You do that, you obfuscate the problem. We need to reflect the problem space. If you're not familiar with the way this works, come talk to me. I'm happy to help educate you and help you understand what's happening with that. So all of these AI tools, they're based on these kind of fundamentally flawed ways of writing code. Now, it can certainly do that quickly, but there's another problem. The AI tools, again, they don't have wisdom. They don't really understand things. So what they're really good at doing is creating a bunch of new code. What they're really bad at doing is deleting a bunch of appropriately deletable code. Some of my best work that I've ever done was more deletions than additions. And a lot of senior developers are going to echo me on this. Most of our best work is not about adding code. It's about removing code. It's about deleting things that really shouldn't be there. Or it's about reframing a problem. We had a problem that was framed in a certain way with certain artifacts and objects and functions. And we reframe the problem from a different perspective, and it gives us a more elegant solution. So we have to delete all that code and create all new code, hopefully with tests, right? We're using test-driven development. Please tell me you're using TDD. So certainly you need that safety net, but we do some of the best code I've ever written was code I deleted. It was somebody else's code that really it didn't fit anymore. Maybe it fit at one point, it doesn't fit anymore. So we need to keep that in mind. Along with that, because AI is really good at adding code, that means it's really good at making it harder to maintain code. As software developers, as software engineers, in order to be able to solve a problem, we have to get all of the code in our head to reason through everything so that we can make the solution to the problem. That is a huge thing to do. It's one of the reasons why it's so mentally intensive to be a software developer. We have to actually get the whole problem in our head. That means all of the code around a problem space. This is why layering is important. This is why creating components is important. This is why creating encapsulation is important. Good classes that stand alone, good abstractions, good encapsulation. This is why all these things are important. Creating good boundaries, making sure you have consistent abstractions, that you don't have a method that has multiple levels of abstractions. All of these things, the reason we do these things is to help us be able to have the problem be conceptualized in our heads. That is a huge thing that we need to be able to do. Well, as we write more and more code, what we're basically doing is making it harder to keep everything in our heads. What does that do? It makes software hardware. Software is intended to be changeable. Again, this comes from Uncle Bob, Robert C. Martin. Software, the core of it is ware, which is the product, and soft, which means malleable, it means changeable. If your software is hard to change, you failed. Software should be very easy to change. We should be able to remove this function and replace it with something else, create this class somewhere else in a new component, a new library, whatever it might be. You need to make sure you keep the soft in software. The more lines of code you write, the harder you make your software. The more unit tests you write, the harder you make your software. I'm not going to go down the diatribe of unit testing versus TDD, but those are not the same thing. So effectively, these AI programs are actually making the software more brittle, harder to change, and more likely to just throw the whole thing out. That's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're doing rapid prototyping. Rapid prototyping is a technique that was introduced about 30 years ago, and it had some really interesting results. The problem is it doesn't solve most of the problems that we have, but it does solve some interesting problems. So if you're using it for rapid prototyping, okay, that's interesting. That's not what most of us are doing. Most of us are not doing rapid prototyping. Most of us are building enterprise software solutions. Most of us are building applications that run businesses. That's not rapid prototyping. And if you think it is, you've kind of confused things. So faster with the trade-off is what we're talking about. It's going to make you faster in terms of writing code, but there's a trade-off. There's a cost associated with that. You need to be very, very careful about how much code you release into the wild. So let's go back to faster again. And again, I'm going to ask, what do you mean by faster? How are you measuring that? So there's a number of research studies. There's two I can think of off the top of my head, but there's a number of research studies that have already demonstrated that while many people believe that they're faster with AI, measurable results show that they are slower, and the numbers are pretty interesting. There was a particular study, I want to say it was from Harvard, I can't remember exactly, I'll have to find it, and if I can find it, I'll share it with everybody. But effectively, the research found that on average, people thought they were about 20 to 25% faster with AI. But objective results show that they were about 10 to 15% slower with AI. So it's interesting because you can fall into the fallacy that, oh, because there's a whole bunch more here, I am faster. Well, that's not necessarily true. What matters is not code. What matters is delivering results to users, delivering value to the business. So let's look at this faster and how we measure it for a moment. In software development, there are a number of disciplines that we have to take into account. So programming is certainly one of them. Coding, writing the actual code to develop the solution. There's also testing, and testing can take on several forms. There's also understanding. There's also communicating with the business. There's clarifying questions. There is the release process. Maybe it has to go to an SRE team. Maybe it has an architecture team. Maybe there's reviews. Maybe there's security. There's a lot of different things that go into the release of software. It's not just code and you're done. In fact, and I believe it was Michael Feather that talked about this in his book, but if you look at all the different activities that are involved in software development, coding accounts for no more than about 10 to 15% of what we do on a regular basis. So 10 to 15% is not that much, right? 10 to 15%, I mean, that's nothing. So let's play this out for a moment. Let's say we can achieve that 10 to 15%, that we're going to make that faster. And let's say you have a special environment where you're above average. Let's say your software development, your coding, your programming accounts for 25% of the time that you spend in the work that you do. All right, so 25%. And let's say that you're getting not a 2x improvement, not a 10x improvement. Let's say you're getting a 1,000x improvement or a millionx. Let's do an infinity x improvement. Let's take that 25% that you're spending on coding and say that now it takes no time. So at best, you're going to have a 25% increase in your overall velocity. That's not true. It's going to be the inverse of that, right? So you're going to be 3/4. So you're going to see a 25% increase in your velocity, which means you're going to have a 33%. So 3/4 inverted, 4/3. So you're going to have a 1/3 or a 33% increase in your overall throughput. At best. The reason I'm stressing that is we need to understand a few things. So first of all, that assumes that we can achieve that. That assumes that we can get there, right? Secondly, we need to also take into concept the theory of constraints. So the theory of constraints says that in order to improve the flow in a system, you need to address the bottleneck. So the question right now we first need to ask is coding the bottleneck? No. In fact, coding was never the bottleneck. The thinking is the bottleneck. The understanding is the bottleneck. In some companies, the review processes and the release processes, those are bottlenecks. The bottleneck is not coding. If the bottleneck is coding, you don't have very good coders. You need to hire better people. You need to pay better salaries. You also need to make sure you have somebody in charge of your software development practice that actually knows how to evaluate that. Dunning-Kruger effect is alive and well. It is a real thing. Coding was never the bottleneck. But let's assume for a moment that coding is the bottleneck. The theory of constraints will tell us that once we remove the constraint from the system, being coding, the 25%, the next constraint is going to limit our ability to deliver. So now this 25 or 33% improvement that we're seeing is a theoretical at best stretch that we might be able to get. And that's assuming you had not just a 10x improvement, you had a million X or a billion X improvement, right? Now it's infinitely fast. You can write code instantly. Now the next bottleneck is going to take effect. What's your next bottleneck? Well, I don't know. That's going to depend. That's going to vary team to team. Maybe it's the testing. Maybe it's the product owners getting requirements in. Maybe it's the release process. Maybe it's the configuration management process. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know what your issues are. That's a team level decision. That's why we have retros. So we can understand what the bottlenecks are and remove those bottlenecks. So this idea that we're going to have some 10x improvement or even a 2x improvement is a pipe dream. It makes no sense whatsoever. At best, with a team that spends 25% of their time on coding, at best, you're going to get a 33% increase in velocity. And that's theoretical, first off, because you're not spending 25% of your time. And secondly, because there's another bottleneck that's going to take effect. That's going to limit your ability to see these improvements. So in reality, you might see, on average, maybe it's a 5, maybe it's a 10% increase in terms of your overall velocity improvement with using AI. Okay, 5 to 10%, that sounds not insignificant. 5 to 10%. How do you distinguish a 5 to 10% increase because of AI from a 5 to 10% increase because your team had a great sprint or a great few sprints, or you had a new developer join your team that was a rock star, or you lost somebody that was holding you back, or somebody had a brilliant idea for a new framework? How do you distinguish 5 to 10%, which is well within our margin of error for estimating over 5 to 6 sprints? How do you distinguish that improvement from any other improvement that's due to just human conditions? How do you measure that exactly? Well, I'll give you the answer to that question. You measure that in the aggregate. You don't measure it on a team by team and a sprint by sprint basis. You would measure that across multiple teams that are all developing AI, all using AI, across several sprints. Like if you're using scaled agile, you would do a PI, or you might do a quarter. Do across several sprints across 6 to 12 teams, and look and see what their velocity was before, and look to see what their velocity was afterwards. That will tell you in the aggregate whether or not you have potentially a real result. I'm going to give you a little bit of spoiler. You're not going to see much. Again, the theoretical max might have been 33% for an amazing team. That's assuming that it sped you up to the level of infinity. That's not reasonable. That's not how it works. So playing all this out, and there's a reason why these AI companies aren't able to charge so much, playing all this out, if you really were able to eliminate a couple of the steps in your software development process, there's still a process that you have to follow in order to be able to release things out. That takes time. You're not going to be able to eliminate all that and go immediately into production. And if you do, welcome to Sarbanes-Oxley. It's a thing. Look it up. So all of this said, I just don't see how anybody thinks that we're going to get a 10x improvement or even a 2x improvement in the velocity of teams. I think at best, you're going to see maybe a 5 to 10% improvement. And that's assuming it actually improves your speed. I'm skeptical about that. I don't know if you can tell from this video. Chances are it's going to slow you down. So the last thing I want to talk about on Faster is your users. Let's be clear about this. Users do not want you to change their system. They like their system just like it is. Yes, some users want the new features. Yes, they've been begging you and pleading for you to add some new features, but you better not change the old ones. You change the old ones, they're going to be ticked off. Users, as a general rule, do not want you touching their system. Every one of us on Microsoft Update Tuesday, once a month, every one of us logs in that next day and we cringe at what's broken. What did they change on us now? Don't change my stuff. Don't move my stapler. Do not touch my things. Users don't want you changing things. So if you were able to create a bunch of new functionality really quickly, do you think your users are going to like that? Do you think they're going to be excited because they have a whole bunch of new No, they're going to hate it. They're going to hate that you're constantly pushing out new things. They want stability. They're using a product for a very specific reason, for very specific purposes. The more you change, the less they're able to automate their own brain in using your tool. Stop releasing stuff all the time. They don't like it. Okay. Being a little bit flippant here, but you get the idea. So even if we were able to deploy all the time to production, which is a noble effort, we want to be able to fix things quickly. That's a great thing to do. Your users aren't going to like it. They're going to hate it. The more you change things on them, the more they do not like your system. And they'll go someplace that they view as more stable. Interesting, no? So will it make you faster? Yeah, I don't know if you could tell. I don't think so. And even if it does, I don't think it's going to make you that much faster. Chances are it's going to cause a bunch of trade offs, and it's going to cause some bloating of code. It's going to cause some slowing down. You're going to get a lot more tech debt. And then people like myself are going to need to come in and clean up the mess. And I'm really good at that, by the way. Should I use AI? So this is another hidden question that a lot of people ask, and I think it's a really good question. So thank you for asking. Should I use AI? I don't think most people should use social media. I think it is an incredibly dangerous technology. It is manipulating our brains in ways that we don't really understand. And AI is doing the same thing. There's starting to be more and more studies around this, and we're starting to understand some of the deleterious effects of using AI on a regular basis. There are some people that say, well, it depends on how you use it. Well, maybe, but if my ability to use something is A, dependent on if I use it correctly, and B, there is no owner's manual for how to use it correctly, then I probably shouldn't be using it, right? So let's take as an extreme guns. Guns, if you use them incorrectly, are going to be very, very harmful and probably deadly. However, we know how to use them safely. In fact, one of the main ways to use them safely is to be taught about their dangerous nature and be introduced to them fairly young, fairly early. You need those rules. You need to understand that you have to have respect for these tools, these weapons, these guns. So that's a case where, yes, it can be harmful to you if you use it wrong, but we know how to use it well. Well, AI, I don't think we know how to use it well yet. I think we're still figuring this whole thing out. Let's go back to mastery. Mastery takes 10,000 hours, right? That's 10 to 15 years. Who has been using AI for 10 to 15 years that oh wait, it hasn't been out long enough to be able to be mastered yet. We have no idea what it's doing. And several of the studies that are coming out are indicating that it is actually creating a dumbing effect on us. It's creating problems with intelligence and reasoning. It's making us less able to think critically. It's making us more dependent on simply getting an answer rather than thinking through the answer. And there's certain people, I saw a study that, it was a white paper, but it talked about a particular professor that instead of rejecting AI, what he was having his students do is have AI write a paper, and then they had the responsibility of tearing apart where AI got it wrong through the hallucinations, through faulty reasoning, faulty logic, and that was a pretty interesting result. I don't know if that's the right way to do it or not. I don't know if that still causes deleterious effects in the human brain. I think all of that still has to be able to be played out. But I know that social media does way more harm than it does good. If you're on social media, you really need to get off of it. There was a great special on, I think it was Netflix, that talked about social media. And one of the things they said in there is there's two industries that call their customers users: computers and drugs. And so think about that for a moment. So yeah, if you're regularly on social media, you need to figure out how to get off of that. That is, whatever gains or benefits you think are there are probably illusory at best, and it is causing an addictive pathogen to make its way into your thinking. You need to get off of social media. And I would argue that AI is equally dangerous. Does that mean it's universally dangerous? No, not necessarily. Where I've seen anecdotally and empirically, where I've seen AI have the most use and maybe the least deleterious effects is in true experts, people that have mastered their skills and they can do things basically autonomously. They have, I know Jonathan Vervaeke and Dr. Jordan Peterson talk about this idea that when you do something over and over, at first it takes your full brain, and as over time, it gets smaller and smaller and moves to the back and left of your brain until there's just this tiny machine in the back of your brain that's able to do things automatically. That's true mastery. That's true expertise. So that idea, so for the people that have truly mastered what they're doing, it does seem like those people are capable of using AI with minimal deleterious effects. That is an hypothesis. I grant you that. I don't know that that's true. I think that needs to be proven out. Should you use it? I don't think so. I think it is incredibly dangerous to use. So if you use it, be careful. Make sure you're not having it do your thinking, right? Make sure you're doing your own thinking. And along with that, I will say this. AI may be capable of writing some code, but I'm not turning over to that. I don't want AI to write my code. I like writing code. I love writing code. I want AI to automate doing my laundry and my dishes and cleaning my toilets. That's what I want AI for. I don't want AI writing my code or writing my poetry or creating art. That's the stuff I love doing. That's the stuff we as human beings love doing. I love writing code. I love designing systems. I love hearing from users and product people about what they're looking to do and figuring out, brainstorming. How do we come up with solutions for that? How do we design solutions for that? I love this job. I love architecting systems. I love trying to figure out how I can simplify my architectures to more clearly reflect the problem space rather than being esoteric versions of some framework that somebody created. I love the idea of figuring out how to layer my diagrams and figuring out how to move objects around and improving the encapsulation of this object by moving some functionality from this class to that one. I love refactoring. I love improving my refactoring skills. I love improving my ability to write good tests, test-driven development. I love coding. I love software development. Why would I want somebody else to do that? That makes no sense. Don't take away what I love. I love this. And if you don't love coding and software development, get out of my industry. I don't want you here. I only want people that love what they do. That's what we should be doing. We should love what we do. If you don't love it, don't get AI involved. Get out. Get me involved. I will happily do your job if you don't love doing it. I love this stuff. Don't take that away from me. Don't take that away from us. Don't automate the things we love doing. Please. So let's circle back. Chad, what do you think about this AI push? Well, I think it reminds me a lot of blockchain. I think it reminds me a lot of RAD tools. I think it reminds me a lot of UML diagramming tools. I think it reminds me a lot of, name the thing that came up that said this is going to solve the world's problems. It reminds me of all the fads that we tend to jump on and think this is going to solve all the world's problems. It reminds me of the dot-com bubble. So is this going to solve the world's problems? I don't think so. Is this going to end humanity? I don't think so. There is not a clear path from where we are with AI registered trademark to AGI, which is the ultimate vision of things. There may be a way to get to AGI, but frankly, I don't think we get there without embodiment. Embodiment is going to be necessary to get to some level of true intelligence, true artificially generated intelligence, the ability to actually reason through things and not just simulate reasoning. So is it potentially useful? Yeah, I think it could potentially be useful. Is it entertaining? Absolutely. Is it high quality? Absolutely not. So what do I think about this AI push? I think it's like a lot of things that we've seen in the past. It's going to end up causing a lot of pain. It's going to be very expensive. There's going to be some people and organizations that centralize power and wealth as a result of it. And ultimately, I think not that much is going to come of it. It's not going away, to be clear. It will, like a lot of technologies, find a niche. It will find a way that it fits into the world. Blockchain found that with cryptocurrency. We don't use blockchain with other things. As it turns out, we actually really like privacy. And blockchain is necessarily about exposing information. So you can't use blockchain everywhere. Well, AI is clearly about a certain thing, and we're still trying to figure out what that is. If you ask me, AI is largely about automating things that are beneath you, but automating them in a way that it's not that important. I really think that the original use of AI is probably the most use you're going to get out of it, which is generative AI. That seems to be where it is fundamentally able to fit in. It's able to hallucinate freely and create new things that did not yet exist. Not truly novel things, but images that didn't exist, or sounds that didn't exist, potentially out of the box thinking that didn't exist. And that's not trivial. That's not useless. That can absolutely be useful, especially in the hands of the right kind of entrepreneur, the right kind of creative director. So to me, I think that's where this is likely going to end up. I don't think it's going to be able to deliver on all the promises that have been made. I think that is a bunch of people that make money off you believing them. So like any snake oil salesman, you need to be very, very careful about what you're being sold. So that's basically my idea of AI, what I think about it. Hopefully that was helpful for you. Please don't take away what I love doing. Let's keep bringing awesome to the people. See you guys later.